Hi, friends. Hope everybody is off to a wonderful week. I am just popping on for a few minutes today to let you know that there will be no official new episode this week. This is the first time that we are pulling a repeat episode. So we are going to be sharing the episode that I did with my husband, David, on loving somebody with PTSD, or more specifically, complex PTSD. This is a really good episode. It's one that David and I did together, and I hope that you all enjoy it. The reason that there is no podcast episode this week is because, quite frankly, it has been a pretty horrible week. I had planned to share with you all a little bit about what has been going on. And I have been, I know I've been touching on the fact that I've had some health issues lately in my previous episodes. And I was really hoping to be able to record a solo episode so that I could share what I'm going through with you all, especially off the heels of having my doctor's appointment. We had a doctor's appointment and we got some kind of just bad news, and it's nothing life-threatening, of course. So, I'm not dying or anything like that. But all in all, it's just very upsetting news. And it's news that we were kind of anticipating, but, upon hearing it, it definitely didn't help. And I think the weight of everything really set in for both, my husband, David, and myself. And, David and I are the ones that run the podcast, and David does all the editing. And I think that he's kind of having a rough time as well. And yeah, it's just been a really difficult week. So I will be back next week, and hopefully I will have had time to process everything, and then I will update you all on what's going on. But right now I'm just not feeling the best. And again, while I was hoping to be able to chat with you all about what's been happening, this weekend definitely looked a lot more like me hanging out in my PJs with my dogs, just being in the grief of all of it. So I love you all. I am holding you all in the light. And I ask that you all hold me in the light as well right now, because things are pretty tough. But I will be back next week, and I appreciate your patience, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. Introduction, because for every episode I'm like, hey everybody, and I sound so cheesy.
No, we gotta stay on brand. That is part of the brand, and we're going with it, baby.
No, it's too cheesy. Welcome everybody. No, that's terrible too. So anyway, guys, hello, guys, girls, they, them, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Light After Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Scolari. And as you may or may not already be able to tell, we are doing an episode with the man behind the scenes today, my husband, David. He is the editor of the podcast and the technology guru. And most importantly, I'm married to him. So, hi, Dave.
Hello.
So the reason behind this is because, as much as I think it's very important to give a voice to trauma survivors, I think it's also equally important to give a voice to the ones who are on the sidelines, supporting us and loving us through our PTSD recovery journey. So I thought that it might be helpful for folks if David came on the podcast today to share a little bit about what it's like to love somebody through PTSD. So yeah, here's Dave.
Hey everybody, how we all doing today?
I can't. I'm going to have to edit that part out.
Dave, edit that part out. You watch that rat bastard. He'll leave that right in there.
So I guess I'll just start firing questions at you.
Go
It's
right ahead.
so weird because I've actually never done a podcast with somebody sitting in the same room as me. So March 23rd will be 3 years that we've been married.
Yes, ma'am.
And when I first met you, we met in 2016.
Indeed.
Did you have any idea that I had a history of trauma?
Not a frickin' clue.
When did you find out? Do you want to talk about from your perspective how it all went down?
Yeah, I guess probably the first time I knew that you had been through something was, I think we were driving to my aunt and uncle's down in Long Beach Island, and on the drive there, you nervously told me that you were seeing a therapist for some things. And I'm sure you were like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell this guy, and he's going to be like, get out in the middle of the Pine Barrens and drive away, never to be seen again.
I did. It was so funny. I dropped that on you, to the listeners out there. When we were dating, I at first didn't tell him I was in therapy because at the time, I guess I embraced the shame and stigma around being in therapy, which I no longer do. I now have no problem and will tell the whole world, obviously, that I'm in therapy. But I was a different person back then. And what I did was I waited until we were in the car. So you couldn't abandon me. We were on a barren road where there was no cell phone service. And I don't think consciously I was doing that on purpose, but I think subconsciously I was definitely all right, I'm going to trap him. Tell him I'm in therapy and there's nowhere for him to run.
And for folks who aren't familiar, in South Jersey, there are what we call the Pine Barren forests. And when you're driving through, A, yes, there is no cell phone reception. B, there's nobody out there, no houses, no towns, no convenience stores for long stretches of the road. So yeah, you're not turning around, you're not going anywhere, you can't just drop somebody off there. I mean, unless, I don't know, you were the mafia and you were doing something down there. But anyways, so yeah.
Yeah, I made it so that you couldn't leave me. But even then, I didn't tell you that I had a history of trauma because I didn't know.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the first time I knew you had some things you were going through or working through. But
eating disorder wise.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But when, in your recollection, were we talking about the fact that I then had PTSD? I don't think it was until after we were married.
Yeah, because I don't think you really uncovered your trauma and kind of started to come to terms with some of it until after we were married.
Conveniently, I would.
Which by then we were locked in, baby, and I wasn't going anywhere.
Which obviously we kid. Part of the reason why I really thought, again, that it would be helpful to have David on here is because he sort of has been through this process with me, and he can look at it from a different lens. And, he didn't know what he was walking into. Obviously, we got married, and then it wasn't until shortly after we got married that I started to have all of these memories come to the surface. And can you tell me what that was like for you? Because there's so much I truthfully don't remember because I was in such a bad place.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you were, it's tough, right? Because, you have your good days and your bad days, and some days we're just in the middle of doing something, random, watching TV, going out somewhere, talking to somebody, hanging out, and you can start having those memories flood back into your consciousness there. And, it can just be very, I would say, probably the word to use would just be unexpected, because, with the process, the recovery process and remembering things, there would just be days again where it just out of the blue, you would be angry, you would be sad, you would be enraged, you would be, all sorts of emotions. And, you would, kind of just be blindsided by it. And so, yeah, it was never consistent, in terms of when you would uncover stuff and remember things and then have all those emotions associated with that. Sometimes you wouldn't even know why you're crying or being mad or angry just because, you were dissociating or, other things. And so you just, it would just come out of the blue.
And what was that like for you being on that kind of roller coaster?
I think the word roller coaster is an apt kind of way to describe it. It can be, challenging sometimes because it can just come out of the blue. And sometimes, no matter, the words that I say or the actions that I take, it's just sometimes a process where we got to cry it out. We got to yell it out, scream it out, and let your body kind of just process in the moment what you were remembering or going through or the things you were feeling.
And I'm sure that for those of you listening, if you have loved ones who have PTSD or complex PTSD and are going through this journey or did at one point, this is probably all sounding very familiar to you, where it's like, especially if you're married to that person or that person is your romantic partner, it's sort of like, 1 minute we're talking about something that's seemingly not emotional. He's asking me what I want for dinner and I'm curled up in a ball on the couch sobbing because I can't make up my mind. And I'm frustrated because now I'm having flashbacks of other times when I couldn't make up my mind in the middle of a trauma. And he's like, what? I just asked you if you wanted pizza or, spaghetti. And I'm bawling. And it's comical in retrospect, right? I mean, when you say like it's funny in retrospect, but let me tell you something. When somebody asks you if you want, or if you're that person that's like, hey, babe, do you want, pizza for dinner? Or would you like, chicken? And that person just curls up into a ball and sobs. It's, I think, extremely stressful and extremely taxing, right? And then on top of it, we had the pandemic. So we've been not stuck because I like you. I love you. I'm such a jerk. So we've been in this house which our house is not big. It's very small, very close corners. Close corners or close quarters?
Quarters.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
Dave, edit that out.
Yep, edit that out, Dave. So we've really not had any time apart. And I've still been going through quite a bit. And does that, like, are there times where you're just at your wit's end?
Yeah, sure. Sometimes, again, just because of what you're remembering, what you're feeling, or what happened that has, brought forth, whether it's at your job or, whatever, has, kind of brought forth memories. And sometimes, I'm trying to calm you down, trying to get you, grounded again. Sometimes I can say things and it helps, ground you. And sometimes what I say doesn't help ground you. And
sometimes
again,
it makes me worse.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes the dogs do a much better job of grounding you than I do. In fact, they way better.
I like my pets.
Indeed.
So what are some things that you think people can do when they see their loved ones struggling, when they see their loved ones dissociating? Because this has been a learning process for you as well. So This isn't something that I've been going through by myself. I've been going through it with you, although at times it feels like I'm by myself. What are some things that you have learned along the way that could help?
Probably, one, patience. I think even in moments when, I go, well, do you want, Wendy's or McDonald's? And you then start bawling out on the couch. And I'm like, oh, this, okay. we can go someplace else. But no, you know what? When that happens, I think the first thing that even sometimes when I'm like, ooh, this is like the third time today where we're having a meltdown, and you know, there's part of me that's like, ooh, not again. Here we go. Part of what helps get me through it is to realize that it's not you. It's the people or events that have caused, you know, the trauma that is now, you know, welling up inside of you, and, you know, to recognize that it's not you being a bad person or, you know, anything like that, but it's those events and those people. And so it really helps put it into context and, you know, allows me to go, okay, you know, hey, maybe this is the third time we're bawling our eyes out on the couch today, but you know, that's okay. We have, you know, a roller coaster ride ahead of us, and we'll be there, you know, and get through the ups and the downs. So I think that's one, just kind of having that context.
So just reminding yourself and reframing, like, this is not that person. Like, this is that person's trauma. That person is not fully present right now.
Yep. And not letting the trauma define the person. You in this, you know, particular case. I think that's hugely important, you know, for anybody to, that reframing, that putting it into context, really allows you to see the person that you've fallen in love with.
Well, how is it that you know and are able to tell when I'm dissociated or when I'm not present? And how are you able to tell it's the trauma? Because I think some people out there, and I think, you know, you don't have a background in trauma, right? You'd have no degree in trauma. This has been such a learning experience. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that have zero experience with trauma, have a loved one who's been through trauma. And like, how are they supposed to tell if it's dissociation? And how are they supposed to calm their own defenses? Like, how can they educate themselves? How can they calm their own defenses? Because I'm sure there are times when I am dissociated, and there have been times where, like, we have fought and you have lost your patience. So what would you recommend for somebody who just has no understanding of even what dissociation is?
Yeah, I think it's really having a conversation with the person who is going through that trauma, whether it's a friend or a spouse or, you know, whatever. I think for you know, you and me in particular, you know, having conversations either outside of your episodes of, you know, crying or, you know, anger or whatever.
It's like after I've calmed down and grounded myself a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I've learned the most, and again, maybe this isn't, you know, for everybody, but I've always learned the most about what you've been through and what you're thinking or have felt at the time, like right after we've kind of grounded you a bit and gotten you to a point where you've calmed down a little bit. Then we're able to, like, we have some like really good conversations that can go from anywhere from, you know, 5 minutes to maybe an hour or more, or we kind of just break down like what you were feeling, what memories came back. And that has, you know, really helped me, you know, put, you know, things into context in terms of, oh, okay, this is what triggered this thought, or, you know, this is what welled up inside of you. And so that's really just added more and more context over the years that I've known you, and we've been going through, you know, through this process. And yeah, just really helps, you know, put it all into context.
So I think one of the biggest takeaways from that is the concept that it's not going to be helpful to talk it out in the moment always. And it's really important to try to help that person when they're really triggered or really dissociated to get to a state of calm first. Because when I'm dissociated, like, there's really no talking it out with me, because you won't win. Whatever you say, I hate it. And in that moment, you're not David, right? In my eyes, you're one of my abusers. And in that moment, I can't stand you. So whatever you say is going to be wrong. It's going to make me worse. I'm not going to like it. And then I'm going to say something that's going to trigger you. And then that's how like blow-ups happen. So one of the things that you've really learned, which I think is going to be helpful for people to hear, is that it's not really about talking it out in the moment. It's about what can we do to, how can I help this person to ground themselves and calm down, and then we will revisit this later.
Absolutely. I think you've said this often, especially sometimes in the moment. You know, me, I'm a very logical sort of person, and
are you ever?
So, you know, I always try and talk things out, and you're like, listen, I totally logically get what you're saying. I hear you, David, but I don't, like, I can't feel that. Like, you know, with the dissociation, you may hear the words, you may agree with the words in some part of your brain, but in another part of your brain it's just blowing up and being like, I don't, you know, care what you're saying. You know, I'm just in this space right now where I'm hearing it, but I'm not processing it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. You know, going back to even something that might not seem trauma related, like when we first got married, and we, you know, as David said, he is all about logic, and I am all about, like, you know, flying by the seam of your pants. Like, okay, let's not look at our bank account. Let's like just get on a plane and go on vacation. And David's like, okay, but the budget, right? So speaking of budgets, like when we first got married, he was like, okay, well, let's, you know, create a budget, because we really did not have, I mean, we were very poor when we, I think it's fair to say, when,
oh yeah.
Yeah, we were extremely, extremely poor when we first started out.
Nonprofits, surprisingly, don't pay a lot of money.
Who would have thought? And we both met working in a nonprofit. And in that nonprofit, I was an employee and David was a volunteer. Mm-hmm. So we really were making like the salary of one person working at a nonprofit.
Right. And probably more like a salary of somebody working at like McDonald's or...
Yes, we were essentially
Walmart.
Making minimum wage.
Right.
And David was like, you know, budget. We got to look at a budget. And I, you know, and now I kind of understand, I understand a lot more why now, but this is like 3 years removed. But back then when we talked about a budget, I lost my ever-loving shit. I mean, like, shut down, cried hysterically, or got mad at him because he wanted to do a budget, and I would refuse. And that was a point of contention, like, one of the biggest points of contention in our marriage, I think, when we first started out, and it was a huge trigger for me. And now I understand why, but back then I had no idea. So, you know, again, it's not always helpful to try to figure it out in the moment, because logically, I knew we had no money. I knew we had a ton of debt. And I knew that budgeting was the only way that we were going to be able to sustain ourselves. But emotionally, I mean, my emotions just took over, and I was incorrigible. You couldn't talk to me about budgeting at all. I thought you were going to kill me. And I'm sure you wanted to at times, because he would just say the B word. He would say budget, and he could just, right? Like you could see the change in me. So you might not have the answers. You might not be able to talk it out in the moment, but, you know, I also think it helps. You've learned a lot coming to therapy with me. You know, it helps that I'm a trauma therapist, so I've been able to teach you a lot about trauma. But for the listeners out there, I don't think everybody, you know, kind of has that luxury of like happen to be dating or married to somebody who specializes in trauma. So one of the things that I think helped you and could help other people out there is go to therapy with your partner.
Or find maybe like a support group or something.
Yes, because it's very hard. If you are the one supporting the person through their recovery journey, it is very, very difficult and very taxing on the relationship. And David has come to therapy with me, and I think you learned a lot.
Oh,
You've
yeah.
read books on trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've even learned a lot through editing this podcast.
Yeah. And also, the nonprofit we worked for did a lot of trauma-informed sorts of trainings and care, even though I myself am not a therapist. All employees did a lot of that sort of training because they wanted to be a trauma-informed organization.
Yep. So pick up a book, go to therapy, find a support group, because it's so important to recognize that this is very taxing for our loved ones who are trying to support us through this. What are some ways that you have found that help me and could potentially help other people with trauma, like ground themselves in the moment?
Sure. I mean, listen, sometimes, I am able to just, talk it through a little bit and get you, grounded that way. I would say the other way would, honestly be the dogs. I mean, they do the most ridiculous things during some of your most intense, episodes there. And it just causes us to laugh. And I think that moment of our dogs laying in the most awkward position possible, coming up and licking your face or, doing other things, just gives that 2-second break in what you're going through, that dissociation, and kind of makes you laugh for a little bit. And you might, still be in that dissociation a little bit, but then, I, see really that you start to come down off of, that dissociation, because just the dogs and the situations and the things that they do, or just they coming up and, you petting them, just really, helps calm you down, and kind of grounds you. So, sometimes, pets, other, kind of external stimulus that can be, I don't know, relaxing, or just to kind of break that tension there, in a dissociation, I think can be really helpful, or has been helpful for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think redirecting me, sometimes, you will get me out of the room that I'm in. Sometimes you'll encourage me to, take a bath. Sometimes he will encourage me to work out even when I don't want to, and I might curse the entire time. But then after I do it, I feel better. I think that you help in a big way by taking care of a lot of like the kind of like the mundane tasks around the house, and making sure that I'm like fed and hydrated and taking my meds. So you do a lot. I mean, there's a lot that you do that helps me be able to manage all of this. But, with that being said, sometimes I think that supporters of those who have trauma, if they take on too much, then their plate gets overwhelmed. And there is only like so much you can take, right? So one of the reasons why the dogs help me so much is because like dogs have never hurt me, right? Men have hurt me. Men have abused me. And that's why sometimes, as great as you are, you're still a symbol for like everything that has hurt me. So sometimes I want nothing to do with you. Sometimes I just need to be with my dogs. And sometimes I will just verbally kind of like assault you. And what would you recommend for somebody who's in that position? Like for like somebody who's sort of trying to support their loved one through their PTSD journey, but is also like, okay, I'm kind of at the end of my rope here as well. Because I think we get to those spots too as a couple where it can be you're at the end of your rope, I'm at the end of my rope. Okay, well, now what? So what do you recommend?
So I think the key here is, is really taking care of yourself. Yes, we're going to say that word, self-care. Or maybe it's 2 words. Is it 2 words, or is it One word,
I think
hyphenated?
it's 2 words.
2 words? All right, well.
Self-care for you.
Self-care for me, yes.
Yes.
So, I don't know, reading a book, playing video games, watching, my own show that I like or something like that can just give me that mental little break to, help me recover a little bit so that the next time you're having a dissociation or whatever, I'm mentally, refreshed. And so I think that's key is yes, taking care of the person who has that trauma, of course, cleaning or cooking or making sure the person is taking their meds, encouraging them, sitting, through with them as they go through a dissociation or an episode or whatever. Those are all things that are important to do. But you also, there is something to be said, when we hear, about self-care is you gotta take care of yourself before you can take care of, somebody else. If you're not eating, if you're not taking a mental break, if you're not doing X, Y, or Z for yourself, that helps you physically and mentally, you're not going to be able to take care of the other person. And so I think that really is key, to do stuff for yourself, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And I think that that's important because the supporters of those who are in recovery can't pour from an empty cup. Mm-hmm. So I just want to be clear that what we're saying here is not drop everything that's important to you as the supporter and take care of the person going through recovery. It's trying to find a balance of supporting your partner while also taking care of yourself. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
But then I also think that even with all of that being said, right, there are going to be times where it's still going to feel like too much. And at that point, there also, I think, should be a discussion. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, sure.
What does that discussion look like? It's not like I don't love you and can't help you anymore, right? But also, like, you can't be expected as the supporter to lay down and kind of take, especially if you're the target. Right? So just because we're supporting somebody through PTSD recovery doesn't mean that we kind of lay down and be a doormat and allow ourselves to be targets for their anger or rage or, whatever it may be. Sometimes we do that as trauma survivors. I do it. I've done it to Dave quite a few times. So what do you recommend for people who find themselves in that position but are afraid to speak up for fear that, like, well, this person's already going through so much. I don't want to tell them that what they did hurt my feelings.
Yeah. I mean, I think, once that person has calmed down and grounded themselves, I think it's perfectly acceptable to then kind of go up and say, like, hey, listen, I know you were going through that dissociation and whatnot, and, you were saying X, Y, and Z things because of, the trauma you had in the past, but, that really hurt, or, I didn't like the way you did this or said that. Because I think that's important because it, where everybody's a human being, right? So we all make mistakes and we all have feelings and emotions, whether we've been through trauma or not. And so, you as the support person, are more, are entitled to your feelings and entitled to, respect and whatnot. And so, we can understand that the person or the loved one, whoever they are, has been through trauma and is, saying these things again, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, context is important, and we can understand that they're saying this, yelling, screaming, crying, saying things to you that may hurt your feelings, because not because again they're a bad person, but because they have have had bad things done to them. But that being said, you also are a human being who has emotions. And so you also are entitled to respect and to love and all that, stuff. And so, yeah, sometimes, just saying it and hearing, being able to say, like, ooh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it, I just, was in the dissociation. And like, listen, I know that. I don't get, my feelings may be hurt, but at the end of the day, I know it's not you that, being bad or trying to be mean to me intentionally. So, yeah, but even just hearing that sorry and like, ooh, like, yeah, that was a bridge too far, just reaffirms that love and respect that you have for me and I have for you, and helps me, move on.
I guess my last question for you is it's been such a difficult process and such a hard thing for you to see me through and for me to go through, obviously. What would you say, because I notice, and I think about this often, that if you hadn't seen me through this, you'd be a very different person today. So what about you and who you are has changed for the better because of what I've gone through and what you've supported me through?
I think I've, become more open about talking about my feelings, which is something that I didn't do before I met you. I generally, am a private person, and so I don't like to talk about those things. But having met you,
I'm doing a happy dance right now because it's so true. You didn't like to talk about anything.
No, that's true.
And now here you are pulling stuff out of me. Sorry. I said I wasn't going to steamroll when I'm steamrolling. Go on.
It's your podcast. So you can do what you want. But yeah, so I think talking about my feelings more, whether it's related to, something that happened during a dissociation episode or just, something that happened at work or in life in general, just talking more about that, which I think has been extremely helpful for me to kind of be able to talk about and process, those things. That's certainly something that's helped me keep me grounded and sane and whatnot. And I think at the end of the day, as I learn more and more about you, and I love you more each and every single day. Yeah. So I think I know when, we started dating and whatnot, you were always afraid of, well, if I tell him, this happened to me or that I'm in therapy or this, he'll love me less. But I don't. I love you more each and every single day.
It's given you a lot more patience.
Indeed.
And I think it's helped you to get to know me on a deeper level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's helped me to, like, in the same regards, it's helped me to get to know you on a deeper level as well. So, well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on here because I know that you're more of a behind the scenes kind of guy. But it's definitely important. So to all the trauma survivors out there, tell your supports how much they mean to you. And to the ones who are listening who are supporters, you mean the world to us, and we couldn't get through this process without supports in our lives. So thank you, as difficult as it may be sometimes. And I just want to point out that, this is David's perspective. This is one person's perspective. So somebody else might feel differently about it. And, that's okay too. If anybody has any questions about what we talked about and, questions for David, please feel free to reach out. You can reach out on my Instagram or my Facebook, or you can email me or go on my website, which is just alyssascolari.com. Feel free to ask questions, because this, I think, is a really important topic and not one that we have talked enough about. So with that being said, very thankful for my husband, for Dave, for everything that he does for me. The podcast would not be possible without him. And yeah, I think that's all we got. I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
And the last thing that I wanted to just let you all know is that I have started a Patreon. So you will see it in the show notes. We have really enjoyed, I have really enjoyed creating this podcast and creating this awesome content for all of you. And I am honestly shocked that in less than 6 months, this podcast has just taken off. It's taken off in ways that I never thought that it would. And as it's gotten bigger and bigger, it's requiring much more time, much more effort, and quite a bit of money. So I did start a Patreon. If you like what you hear and you are interested in contributing at all to that, I would greatly appreciate it. Any little bit counts, and all the money goes towards really just helping to keep this content, awesome, as great as it is, keep it high quality, and to just keep things rolling out smoothly on a weekly basis. So just wanted to let you all know about that. Again, any contribution would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening, everyone. For more information about today's episode and to sign up for the Light After Trauma newsletter, head over to my website at alyssascolari.com. The really great thing about being a part of this newsletter is that not only do you get weekly updates on new podcast episodes and blog posts, but you also get access to the private Facebook community, as well as access to all sorts of insider tips, resources, and infographics that supplement what we talk about on the show. You also can connect with me and other trauma warriors. I'm super active on the Facebook community, and I look forward to talking with you.